Yo, what's up, YouTube? My name is Emmanuel Moore. This is my COM301 presentation. It's titled Media Mentality. As presented on www.csun.edu 2007, the average American watches more than 4 hours of TV each day. That's 28 hours a week, or 2 months of non-stop TV watching per year. Have you ever wondered how watching so much TV influences your ideology? The 2005 film Class Dismissed states, "Because we see television as entertainment, we readily disregard its impact on our thinking." I didn't start thinking about the role media played in influencing my ideology until I began studying communication. I've studied communication for the past 4 years, and after reading about race, gender, and class in media, I wondered whether media use their power to criticize society's habits. All responsible adults and citizens should take this into consideration, but as scholars, we are given tools to help us analyze media more effectively. If we look closely, we can see that some media criticize society's habits in subtle and/or extreme ways. By understanding the difference between media that criticize society's habits and media that reinforce them, an individual can be empowered. The Boondocks is a critical media, a media that criticizes society's habits. According to the Netflix 2013 description, the animated satirical series follows the socially conscious misadventures of Huey Freeman, a smart 10-year-old who relocates from Chicago to the suburbs. Today, we will analyze scenes from 3 episodes to see how Boondocks use satire to criticize society's habits. We'll look at scenes from episode 1, The Garden Party, to see how class ideologies are criticized. Then scenes from episode 2, The Trial of Robert Kelly, to see how race ideologies are criticized. And finally, scenes from episode 3, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, to see how gender ideologies are criticized. There are few media that criticize society in flamboyant ways, but the Boondocks does so on multiple levels throughout the entire series. So we'll begin with class. The quest for class, cultural class especially, or education, taste, and lifestyle, LISNA 2005, is one of the first topics the Boondocks ridicules. After being told to act like you got some class by their grandfather, Huey's younger brother Riley asks, "What's class?" Huey replies, "It means don't act like niggas." And The Garden Party, the Boondocks ridicules a once overlooked theme in media, that in order to gain class, you have to act like white people. Robert Freeman, the boys' grandfather, explains to them, "I moved y'all out here to expand your horizons. There's a new white man out here. He's refined," he says. The explanation given for their grandfather, or given by their grandfather rather, implies a search for culture. The next scene focuses on things white people do. "I know a lot about white people too," Riley says. "Like when they talk, they say the whole word like this." Then he says, "White people take time out to study, and white people arrest you." This is the gist of his conversation with his brother while they spy on white people through a telescope. The satire around black people's actions to gain class and fit in is obvious in both scenes until the end of the episode, when Mr. Onceler finally exclaims his acceptance of Freeman. We've seen how the television series attacks class. Now let's look at how they pick apart race. In the Boondocks, black people's habits are constantly criticized. The Trial of Robert Kelly is no exception. Race in the animated satire is depicted to the extreme and is loaded with sarcasm. In a direct criticism of people's behavior during R&B superstar R. Kelly's trial for urinating on a 14-year-old girl, the Boondocks shows illiterate black people fighting with scholars and make Kelly look even worse, quoting him, "In the words of my sister soldier, an injustice anywhere is an injustice anywhere. Amen." During the trial, the white defender gets an all-black jury to identify with him as another black man, and the black prosecutor is belittled for having a white wife. At the end of the trial, the defender pulls out a stereo and plays a song that everybody starts dancing to, including the judge, while Kelly sings on a table. This episode definitely points out behavioral habits that some black people are all too willing to engage in. Episode 3 focuses on gender. Gender habits are one of the final topics the Boondocks chastises. This episode calls attention to some women's tendency to identify themselves as hoes or gold diggers as an alternative to working. The episode tells the story of how Freeman falls in love with a prostitute despite all the obvious signs of her lifestyle. Some black people idolize sex, players, and pimps. Pimps have become popularized and mainstreamed, according to Trisha Rose in her essay, There Are Bitches and There Are Hoes, 2008. Crystal, like the champagne, feels like her only best chance to make a living is to be someone's bitch. Even after being offered a way out, she chooses to run after a pimp named Slickback, screaming, "No daddy, wait, wait," as he drives down the street. Obviously, this is an extreme exaggeration of society, but it aims to deride some women's reliance on men and or potential to date men for their money. Gold diggers, bitches, and hoes are fun to laugh at. When people accept these ideologies, there is a real problem. Combined with class and race, the problem becomes even more complex. Today, we looked at how the Boondocks criticizes ideologies of race, class, and gender using satire. We saw how class was ridiculed by listening to Freeman's explanation for moving the boys to the suburbs in episode 1, The Garden Party. Then we saw how the dominant ideology of being black was criticized for revolving around ignorance in episode 2. Before finally, we were shown how the hoe ideology was chastised for being prevalent even in the wake of opportunity. The Boondocks' depiction of habits is not without reason, and if you understand the reasons, a series like the Boondocks won't seem so offensive. There are very few media today that criticize society's habits. Media that I've labeled critical media. In an effort to shun and show the ignorance of unhealthy habits, the Boondocks depicts these habits in extreme cases. An informed individual can tell the difference between media that are trying to persuade or influence them to change the way they think. In a society that spends so much time engrossed in different forms of media, it's important to understand how it influences you and resist that influence if need be. Additionally, informed individuals have a responsibility to educate others to break down some of those oppressive ideologies. In conclusion, criticize what you watch and accept what you see only after doing so. Know the difference between media that criticizes society's habits and media that try to reinforce them, because media influence our worldview, and that's reason enough. Thanks.